Here we are,
Hello, we're
part
back.
numero duros of the first annual top 25 position list, starting with the centers. Again, part two. Part one, we did 25 to 14, plus talked about a couple surprises and a couple guys who missed out. Not going to waste too much time recapping that. You could take a look in the description, watch the recap for that. Anyways, starting right away, number 14, who do we have?
Capela.
Clint Capela. I think we actually had a tie originally at 14-2 with Capela
We
and Montrezl
did.
Harrell, correct?
We did. Yeah, and our tiebreaker made it so that Capela ended up in the lower position, which is crazy considering that Capela has been a starter for a winning team until last year with Atlanta. Put up amazing numbers last couple of years, one of the better defensive players in the year. And he still ended up under Harrell. Interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at Capela's stats, it's one of those things almost where the numbers, I guess, lie in this circumstance because, I mean, he put up 15 and 13 a game, I believe, last year. He was injured for a good portion of it, but, I mean, at the end of the day, again, those are great stats, and his stats weren't far off years previous as well. He's a very high double-double guy. He does it very often. He gets his blocks too, like you said, a good defender. It's just almost like he almost seems one-dimensional on the offensive end, and I think that's what brings him down a lot. I don't know what you kind of think about that there, but yeah, it does seem low, even though I guess we made the list to criticize ourselves. But yeah, it definitely does seem low for a guy who does average as much as he does. And like you said, has been so consistent over a number of years as well.
Oh, completely. Like he did 13.9 and 13.8 rebounds last year. So that's a pretty solid year. 1.8 blocks. The year before he had a year of 16 and 13. So he's right up there. His stats show him as a top 10 center, and his defensive abilities show that he might be even higher.
Yeah, and it really comes down to, I guess, the more we go through the list and the more you talk about it, when, again, you look at those stats and you really do think that he should be. But, again, the guys ahead of him, it is going to be, I feel, easy to justify him, where I guess maybe the only difficult one is Harrell. But I think the big difference here is obviously going to be clearly the difference that they make to the team itself. I think obviously Harrell is going to have a bit more of an impact on the Los Angeles Lakers, and he also obviously has for the Clippers, and he has improved year after year. I mean, Harrell could easily be a 22 and 8 guy, which isn't really worse than 13 and 13. Like, it really just depends what you need in that circumstance. And when the Lakers obviously have a guy who's going to eat all the boards, like Anthony Davis, LeBron's going to get his own. That 22 and 8 is completely fine for the Lakers. And again, his game, I guess, all around just ends up being a bit better that way.
Fine. That 22 and 8 would be fantastic for the Lakers. He's probably not even starting. So, but no, it's Clint Capela can prove us wrong. He played on Atlanta. He's going to start this year, obviously. Him and Collins down low, they're going to bang hard. I think they're actually going to compete very, very hard with the pickup Atlanta did. They could be a playoff team. If that's the case, then Capela's going to prove us wrong.
Yeah.
If he's a leader on that team, leading them to the playoff, one of the vets on that team at this point, even though he's still very young, could be pretty good.
Yeah, definitely. And it's really, like, as long as he plays, I think, over 55, 60 games, and he does do that, I mean, there's no chance if there was an All-Star game that I wouldn't say Clint Capela could be an All-Star. He easily couldn't crack the top 10 next year.
Hell, 15 and 15 could be in his realm.
Definitely. And since we already talked about him, I guess we'll move on to him right away. Is Montrezl Harrell at number 3.
Trez!
Big old Trez. Hurt the Clippers' hearts. Broke everyone. Just literally didn't move anywhere and literally just decided to just change his shirt and call himself part of a new culture.
Why would he move? He has a house down there. He got a life.
Exactly.
Life is good when you're with the Lakers. They're a winning team.
Exactly.
Championship.
And I mean, even though I just said at number 14, he very well could be a 22 and 8 guy. That's obviously, again, on the team where if he had a primary role or a main role like he did with the Clippers, where I think he had about 19 and 7 or 19 and 8 last year, where adding a few more points, no harm there. But again, a role with the Lakers probably be more similar to that Kevin Love, Chris Bosh, obviously third fiddle, where he probably does lose a couple points in terms of, or production in terms of points wise, probably goes down to 15 or 16. But I think everyone around him on that team is just going to talk about how great of a player he's been.
And yeah, he brings a certain mindset too. Outside of his stats, he brings a little bit of toughness. He brought that to the Clippers for all these years. They're gonna miss him. Ibaka is a good replacement, but they're gonna miss him hard.
Yeah, and it's really, I mean, he's younger. He's obviously more athletic. He's going to put up more minutes per game. He's going to be more consistent. And it allows guys like LeBron and Anthony Davis in the shortened off season to really take away some of their wear and tear, whether it be for sitting a whole game against the 15th seed at the time, or just not forcing them to go into the post-all game and actually getting a rest and not having a bruised thigh, just going to bed with it. It makes a big difference at the end of the day.
Oh, completely. And it's fantastic pickup by the Lakers, as we mentioned in different videos before. They probably sold free agency with that pickup, just with the facets he brings on offense, the mentality, the toughness he brings with them. It's going to be a great fit with Davis and LeBron.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only knock on him really is he does have no range. Like, he doesn't shoot well from the free throw line, doesn't shoot well from the three-point line, obviously.
Neither did McGee and neither did Howard.
Exactly. So obviously that makes it great. And another great thing about him too is, as aggressive as he is on the defensive end, he's actually very disciplined. He was actually 42nd among centers in personal fouls committed last year. So, I mean, he's not a guy who takes a lot of fouls by any means. He's going to be, again, in these games consistently. And when, again, LeBron and Anthony need the rest, he's clearly going to be there. He's not going to get himself into foul trouble in many games. And I think that's going to pay off for them in the long run as well.
Yep, no, I can't agree more. He can actually prove us wrong as well. One of those guys that a couple of guys ahead of him are a little bit of the older variety. That if he puts up these great numbers, he ends up being that like you say, 22-8 player potentially. He could actually go up in these rankings, even though a lot of people would consider him considerably high for a six-man. But he can definitely go up in these rankings considering the potential he has in that team.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, on that note, I guess, who do we have at number 12?
And this is what I mean by one of those guys that's a little bit of the older variety who could have a little bit of regression this year. We don't know yet. But still a leader of his team, Lamarcus Aldridge, former All-Star with Portland and San Antonio. What does he bring?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was going to reiterate exactly what you just said, where it's one of these guys who, even though he's still a great player, likely on the decline. I mean, next year we probably won't see him as high as you mentioned. A lot of these guys probably are going to come over him, but number 12 for the year, Lamarcus Aldridge, obviously still a guy who's going to put up over 15 points, close to 10 rebounds a game.
Easily.
Knows the Spurs system. Again, not a guy who's consistently going to get into foul trouble. Usually is pretty good for playing at least 60 to 70 games. So, I mean, the big thing is, at the end of the day, he's not Tim Duncan. He's not someone who is going to have, I think, almost these consistent kind of 15 and 10 by the time he's 38, 39. So I really do think he maybe only has a year or two left of about above 12 points. So we'll see how this year goes for him. But this year he obviously comes to number 12.
I love how you're talking like he has a few more years yet left of above 12 points, and we have him frankly the 12th best center in this league, above people that have averaged last year 18, 14, 17. Yeah. But no, he still has the potential though to be that all-star player with San Antonio. He still has the potential to lead that team to the playoffs. I think that's what we can't discount on him. He's a little bit older. You're right. He's not Tim Duncan. Nobody is Tim Duncan. Nobody brings that defensive mentality. But if he can bring that team to the playoffs like he actually can, if he's healthy next year, DeRozan's healthy. I know we said that last year, but the younger guys are getting better. These guys are getting a bit older, but the game that they play is not something that depends on athleticism. I think that being said, that Aldridge could keep up the couple of years that he's had in the past, and if the Spurs come All-Star time are in that playoff seed, 6th, 7th seed, and he's up there with a 20-8 season, he could be a potential All-Star.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think he needs 28. I mean, yeah, he might not make the All-Star team, but I'm with you that he probably will have a very similar year to last year, and that's why he's ranked so high. Even though, again, he, like I said, he might only have a couple years left at above a double point per game production level. I still do think this year is going to be relatively well for Lamarcus Aldridge. I definitely think it'll probably be, again, at minimum, like a 16 and 8, 16 and like 7.5 at the very, very least. And again, it's more so the things he does. Like I'm sure he's going to have a great plus minus. He's going to be on the court when they need him. He's probably going to hit some big shots. Obviously, going to hit the free throws he needs to. He's obviously able to extend the floor a bit. So Lamarcus Aldridge overall, he's one of those things where again he just fits in the system so well, and he's just such a smart player at this point of his career. It's hard to rank him any lower, really.
He's just so consistent.
Exactly.
So can't agree more. If as we're gonna get higher in this list, you're gonna see that he's probably the last guy who is over the age of 31. I'm 32. I think Lamarcus is 34 now. We are going to a little bit younger, but the next person on this list just brings a little more athleticism, a little more size. Personal favorite of mine,
I know.
Toronto Raptor draftee, Jonas Valanciunas.
Yeah, number 11.
Great guy.
This is a very hard one for me to rank because skill-wise, I feel like he's probably a top 7 or 8. But it's being, again, like you said, a Raptors fan, we know that he just burns out. We could see one of the best first halves, we feel like, in the history of the Toronto Raptors for a center ever. I mean, puts up 22 points in the first half. Looks like no one could stop him. And then he puts up 2 points the second half. He just has no energy, nothing the second. And it's something where I feel like maybe it was just the shape he was in. Like I feel like Memphis, he's improved a bit because he really knows he's that core piece. But yeah, it's until they really make the playoff run and he shows that he can do the things like a Mark Gasol, like the obviously guys that he's trying to emulate. We can't rank him into a spot much higher. He's skill wise again, very, very good. But production wise, in terms of the win-loss ratio that Jonas Valanciunas ends up producing from is what really hurts him, I think.
Yeah, and it's hit or miss. Memphis is on the rise. They've been doing very well with him. Whenever he's in the lineup, he's been producing. And that's why he's ranked so high. Is that he's so consistent at that 15, 11 rebounds per game. He brings a certain mentality. He doesn't really play more than 30 minutes typically. But like you say, he does fade out a little bit in the second half, which is why the Raptors traded for Marc Gasol. Would I take Valanciunas back on the team right now? 100%. Like tomorrow, I would take him back. He would be the starting center of the team. He would fit in very well. He doesn't really have that 3-point shot. He's trying. He does take one or two per game, but that mentality he brings, he's a great veteran presence at this point. He's not a young kid.
But even then, he shot 35% from three last year and 1.3 attempts. So I feel like he has developed that game pretty good, honestly. Like maybe if he gets to 2 attempts, we might see that dip below, but he's going to be an over 30% 3-point shooter. I feel like even at 2 attempts. And for a center, I guess, again, a guy who, like you said, puts at 15 and 11 without even really needing that ability, that's great, honestly. And again, looking at those stats, you think of a guy, again, like we said, Clint Capela, that's just what puts a guy like JB over where he is able to stretch the floor. Like he's still an amazing rebounder. He still has that size. He still is that force down low. And that's what allows him to be over. And I just really hope that, like you said, Memphis is on the rise. Hopefully we see some really great moments from JB and it just allows him to unquestionably be in the top 10 instead of us sitting there and trying to figure out where to round him in, and him just being a cups guy, whether just missing or just making it, comes in at number 11 this time, as mentioned.
Just couldn't crack the top 10.
Unfortunately not.
But we'll understand why. At number 10 right now, we have a guy who put up much higher numbers, has put up numbers for a couple of years, probably undervalued considering his numbers, Hassan Whiteside.
Yeah, I mean, Hassan Whiteside is probably basically like the best kind of just very old school center that you want. Maybe not complete old school, but almost like 2000s old school, where it's just a hard guy in the paint, like almost like a Ben Wallace who could still put up points. We didn't ever see Ben Wallace put up 16, 18 a game, 18 a year, and Hassan Whiteside has consistently done it. And I mean, he's consistently again a defensive player of the year candidate, always a blocks leader, maybe the best rebounder in the league. And like you said, possibly the most underrated, not just center, but maybe player in the league.
Couldn't hit it on the nail better there. Like you say, he's 15 and 13 last year, 2.9 blocks per game. And whenever Vucevic was coming, Nurkic was coming back from injury, he was still considered a bench player. It's crazy how opinions of him change so quickly. He's over in Sacramento now. That's a good young team. He's got a good chance there. I wouldn't note his chances there. I think he's going to do very well in that team. Just at 13, I hoist up a lot of threes, which is great for him because he can eat up all those rebounds. He does jump a lot when it comes to his blocks, which does get him out of position defensively quite often. But with that being said, he led the league in blocks again last year, I'm pretty sure. He puts up these great numbers, and it just seems like he goes from team to team at this point, and nobody respects the numbers he puts up.
I mean, definitely. And I feel like the main thing for Portland was the fact that they didn't get farther. And it's just unfortunate for him. I guess Portland is just a team that works better with Joseph Nurkic. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think Hassan Whiteside still put up the stats last year. I don't think it was Hassan Whiteside's fault Portland ended up where they did. And like you said, I think he's a great fit in Sacramento, not just for the fact that they do shoot a lot of threes, but the fact, again, they also have De'Aaron Fox, who they're going to be able to have that almost like Lob City mentality where Fox would just put it up there. Hassan Whiteside can easily just put that thing in two-handed every single time. So I don't think it's going to be difficult for Whiteside to maybe even put up 20 per game this year just because he is going to get the ball so much. I'm not saying I don't even think maybe necessarily it's likely he will, but I mean, something along the realms of 18 and 14, I could definitely see.
Yeah, and if he does get that, then a team like Portland is going to be saying, why didn't we retain him, considering that they could have went over the salary cap to keep him? It would have cost quite a bit in luxury tax because he did go for quite a bit of money, but it's good for Hassan to put up those numbers after getting almost disrespected in Miami and Portland.
Yeah, I think Portland is going to regret it. Really what they did is they took Enes Kanter back because he's very similar to Nurkic in style, and they just get to run the whole same system the whole game. But I mean, I think having the interchangeable centers would have been very valuable for them, especially against teams like Los Angeles or Houston, who still might not even have a full size center for 48 minutes a game.
And if Nurkic gets injured again, we don't know.
Exactly.
Well, we do know that Whiteside did put up some great numbers. It is a bit surprising that he isn't a little bit higher. It's pretty telling about the talent ahead of him, though.
Yeah, I guess just before you even continue, it's almost funny because I feel like going into this and everyone feels like center's weak, but I feel like when you
it's deep.
It's very deep. There's a lot of good players at center.
It's very surprising. Players like DeAndre Jordan and Marcus Hall aren't even top 25 anymore. It's very, very surprising for sure.
And like you said, even some of the guys who are mentioned aren't even top 10. It's crazy.
JP, Aldridge, Harrell, Capela.
Imagine
Pelicans 14 and 14. He's barely top 15.
Imagine a point guard putting up a double-double and not making the top 25. That would be crazy.
It's funny because a lot of the players that are in our top 10, some of them don't even average 10 rebounds per game.
No. But you're so good at a couple things. I mean, I guess it justifies you a top 9 spot, right?
So you get the job spot.
Exactly.
But again, top number 9 right now, we do have someone that gets much more than 9 rebounds per game. Andre Drummond. He's been a rebound leader. He was very well worthy of his max contract got a couple years ago. And then he was eventually traded for sack of potatoes.
Yeah, and I mean, this was a guy personally who I even had a spot higher. I had him at number 8. It's a guy very similar to Hassan Whiteside because I feel like they play so much around the rim. They're almost undervalued. But I mean, the numbers every year always there for Andre Drummond. And I feel like every year come All-Star time, he just misses it. And it always seems like a robbery. I'm not sure why, but it's almost like Al Jefferson and guys like that, Carlos Boozer back in the day, were the great players. They put it up. They just don't get the full respect.
Respected. But is he really a good fit with Kevin Love? That's the tough one.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's not anything worse than Tristan Thompson. I mean, that team wasn't great to begin with. They haven't been a playoff team without LeBron James, so we can't say that's a good fit because they didn't put up wins and losses. But clearly they gave up on Tristan Thompson because they felt like Andre Drummond was just an upgrade, and they're obviously going to get to just put Love back into that position opposed to having to cycle through the three of them. So I feel like you're actually pretty comfortable with that. Kevin Love, obviously, when LeBron and Kyrie was there, I think he talked about it even recently in an interview how he really did have to change his game. And it was hard because he played professional basketball the same way for 25 years, where he would start the game in the post at the rim, get a couple easy buckets, and make his way out. Versus LeBron and Kyrie, he was immediately starting the game in the corner three. And I feel like that's how it's probably going to be when Drummond's there too. And I think Love's used to it now. So I do think it's okay.
My issue with that is with Love and Drummond, that team's still not a playoff team. With that being said, Drummond still is a great player. With them fitting in properly, he'll probably get 18 and 12, 18 and 13 next year. He puts up the numbers. He gets those rebounds per game. He's that hustle guy. I can't picture him staying in Cleveland long term. I think that they're going to try to flip him at the end of the season because he's going to be on an expiring contract. But we also think the same with Kevin Love. That clearly hasn't happened yet. So I don't know if he's going to play competitive basketball in the next couple years, but he'll put up the numbers on that Cleveland team for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I guess the thing for Andre Drummond is he himself, I feel like, thinks he's the best center in the league. But unless he's a guy who's going to put up 24 in the rebounds he does a game, he really can't establish himself any higher than he is. Unfortunately, he just doesn't have the well-rounded offensive game. I mean, he's never been able to stretch the floor. He still struggles, as much as I've said about other centers, but from the free throw line, he just finds himself in a higher spot than a lot of these other centers, A, because of the amount of years he's been this consistent, and B, because he is just such a ball hawk around the rim.
He eats those rebounds.
He does.
He's probably him and Whiteside are definitely the best.
Not just rebounds too, blocks too. It's just Andre Drummond, Hassan Whiteside, Anthony Davis, and then Miles Turner sometimes finds himself in the mix. I mean, he's one and he's fourth, but at the end of the day, those three guys you could bank on every year to be in the top 5 for blocks, essentially.
Completely.
And I mean,
that's why he makes it in the top 10.
Yeah, and he's been Defensive Player of the Year as well, Andre Drummond, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So,
with those numbers that he puts up, he could easily be in the top 5. But with that being said, he hasn't been on the winning team since in his whole career at this point. If he ever does go into a winning team and he puts up those same numbers and they're in that top 4 position in the playoffs, then he could put himself in the top 5. But until he gets onto that winning team, he is what he is at this point.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing to say. I mean, a guy we haven't seen yet like Rudy Gobert is a great thing because I think Rudy Gobert puts up a bit less in every category and very similar to Andre Drummond, the things he could do. But he does find himself on a winning team, and as mentioned, we haven't heard his name yet. So we'll see where he falls on this list as well.
I assume Rudy Gobert makes it into the top 8. Maybe he would be. Maybe he missed out. I don't know. Well, let's see. Over at number 8, though, just past Andre Drummond, we have Nikola Vucevic over with the Orlando Magic. Puts up definitely less rebounds per game than someone like Drummond, but he's been leading Orlando to that playoff spot the last couple of years. He is a leader on that team. He still puts up that 20 and 11 per game. He's a solid player.
Yeah, and I mean, I think any day I would sacrifice a couple rebounds for a guy who has the offensive ability of Nikola Vucevic. Yeah. I mean, and again, a guy who has improved year after year, but like you mentioned, actually has found an ability to lead his team to the playoffs, where a guy like Andre Drummond struggled, not just in Cleveland, but in Detroit, where they did fully rely on him and he couldn't. and they did rely on Nikola Vucevic, and they did. So I mean,
Yep.
it's great. We'll see how well they continue with that. I think Nikola Vucevic, I honestly think because of we won't talk too much about the Magic, but overall I think that team's on the decline. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see him get moved at some point. But
I'd love it for him, to be honest, to get on nothing better.
exactly. And I think at this point, he's probably topped out production-wise. I don't think we'll see him ever get, again, 24, 23. I think he's probably about this 20 and 10, maybe 21 and 9, around this range kind of thing. But obviously, again, on a better team, I think his skills would be shown a bit more around the NBA, but definitely one of the best offensive centers in the NBA without question.
He actually put up 21 and 12 last year, which is a fantastic year, to be honest. And that kind of year with another star player with one or two more stars could be a real competitor in the league. It's just very sad that the only other stars in that team are Gordon and Isaac, maybe Terrence Ross puts up his blank points, but that team still without that star power, with someone like Vucevic, probably the best player on that team. Like you say, they're still able to compete for that playoff spot, and they at least win one game every playoffs.
Yeah, and I mean, the biggest knock on him really is just the fact that he isn't the best defensive post player.
Yeah.
Like, he does average less than a block per game. He's a 7-footer. And at the end of the day, that is something that they really can't have when they do have guys like Jonathan Isaac injured. Aaron Gordon, as great of an athlete is, he rarely plays over 50, 55 games. So it really hurts them in the post at the end of the day. They obviously tried to get Mo Bamba, unfortunately, you're awful. I can't say much else.
Hey.
Nikola Vucevic obviously is pretty much the leader of the Orlando Magic, and it kind of sucks that they don't have someone else great around him, because he, on a team where he's the number 2, is probably a top 5 seed, to be honest.
Personally, I'd love the Raptors to trade for him. If Masai, you're listening to me, make a serious offer, get some like Terrence Davis over there, and let's figure it out.
And if Mo Bamba, you're listening to me, we don't actually mean you're awful. You would still, unfortunately, dunk on us both, so it's okay.
Oh, any day of the week. But after Vucevic, at number 8, we had Vucevic, but at number 7, we have somebody who actually put up less stats than Vucevic. Yusuf Nurkic. He was actually hurt most of last year. He barely played, put up less stats, but we have him higher ranked.
Yeah, I mean,
what's going on there?
For me, it's just Nurkic is not only, again, like Vucevic, one of the best offensive centers in the league, but he has little elements to his game that really make him, I think, more valuable. I mean, even amongst centers, I believe he was second in steals with 1.4, only behind Andre Drummond, ironically, who, again, is always one of the top defensive players of the year. Aside from that, too, Nurkic, very efficient. He's one of the best he's one of the best free throw shooters for centers. He really just loses, I guess, his touch on the three-point line. He was only 20% last year, and he did shoot 1.2 per game. And I mean, that's, again, I think that's the big knock on Nurkic for me, is his IQ. Again, he shoots at least a 3 per game, and he makes 1 out of 5. So, I mean, he's going to take a bad shot almost every game, essentially. On top of that, too, he had 5 fouls per game last year. And so he's a guy who does struggle to actually use his size in a way where he's able to just get blocks and actually just, I guess, disrupt shots, opposed to sending someone to the foul line. So I think those are a couple of things that really hurt Nurkic on this list. But those are things I think with maturity and with starting and being in the starting lineup more often are really going to help him. And hopefully he can really get more consistency on this 3-point game too. But I do think overall, just his spacing, again, both on the offensive and defensive end, and his ability to put the ball in the net is really what gets Nurkic high on this list.
Yeah, I can't agree more. It's that fact that he fits in that role that so perfectly in Portland. He's able to hit those shots. He doesn't have to be that star player. Someone like Vucevic, in his role, he has to be that star player. Nurkic doesn't have to be that. But that being said, I don't know if his 5 fouls per game is really fair on him last year. He played 8 games. But I do think that if he comes back to what he was before, he can easily be that 17, 18 points per game guy, get his 10 rebounds per game. But like you say, he stretches the floor. he fits that role that he needs to fit, whether it be in Portland or anywhere else. He is that solid team player. You're right. He does hit his free throws stronger. I don't know why. He does very well at that. But I just think he's a really great fit there. My big knock on him is his injuries. 8 games last year. He's been in the league for about 6 years now. He's never actually played more than 79 games. Most of his years have been under 70 games. If he does play an 80-game season, maybe he actually works his way up this list because he does play that fundamentally, that solid role player. He fits in the holes that he needs to do, but he just has to play a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And it does feel like he is a bit soft almost, not in terms of being able to push guys around, but in terms of his body, just not being able to handle it like you maybe mentioned. So hopefully he can do that. Again, back to the free throw shooting. It's amazing for a center how good he really is. He was 0.5 points better than any other center in the league. He almost shoots at a 90% rate for a center. Again, not a lot of games last year, but could he easily be in like over 80% free throw shooter for a guy who's probably, other than, yes, he's going to get the ball and he does play with his back to the net, but when he does grab the ball off the rim, he usually just goes right back up, and that's where he's getting a lot of these fouls. So picks a three from the Lillard or McCollum, you grab it, you get to put it back up, and you have a great free throw shooter going to the line. Can't ask for much else.
The Bosnian Beast.
Exactly.
Right on top of him, just outside of the top 5, here at number 6, we have I can't believe he's higher. He's a former defensive player of the year, Rudy Gobert. He is the anchor of Utah, which is a perennial 50-win team. It's almost insulting that he's not higher on this list.
I mean, yeah, I think it comes down to really the fact that, again, like Drummond, he is almost one-dimensional in terms of what you're getting with Rudy Gobert every single game. You know that, yes, he's going to put up probably 2 blocks every game, not just the sense that he averages that, but literally every single game he's probably going to get you 2 blocks. He's going to put up 10 and 10, 12 and 12. It's going to be consistent, not going to take a lot of bad shots, but at the same time, still can't hit his free throws. I mean, he
opposite nurture.
No, yeah. So, I mean, and I guess I guess going back to your point too, for Gobert being lower, it's the things he does around the game too that I guess are devalued. He was 10th among centers, or I believe maybe even the NBA last year in real plus minus at +4. So I mean, that's great for him. He's obviously valuable when he's on the court, but to be ahead of the guys who are ahead of him, I just don't think he does enough. We're going to see, obviously, on this list that, especially with the top 3, these are guys who are the anchors of their team. And even coming in at number 4 and 5, it's guys who are potentially going to be in that role versus Rudy Gobert is not. Donovan Mitchell's the anchor of that team. Gordon Hayward before him was the anchor of that team. No matter where Rudy Gobert goes, he's probably not going to be the 1, might not even be the 2 a lot of places. So that's really what leaves Gobert in the 3rd spot, even though, again, like you said, is a great defensive player, maybe even the best in the league, if not one of them.
Potentially.
Plus minus wise, again, very consistent, doesn't do a lot of bad things on the court, just, again, doesn't do as much as the guys ahead of him.
Yeah, and before this year, you may have said that Gobert was the leader of that Utah team. Mitchell really stepped up this year. Gobert, we thought that whenever the star players would leave, that he was going to up his points per game. He still only hit 15 last year. If he's able to get to that 20 points per game level and able to stretch just a little bit, he could become much higher on the list. He could even crack the top 3. But with where he is today, that he hasn't progressed in a couple of years. He keeps getting a little bit more rebounds per game, but not really, considering 4 years ago he hit 12.8. Last year he had 13.5. He just hasn't shown that progression every year. As much as he is the best defensive center in the league, I think that's not questionable, but he just doesn't bring it on the offensive end, especially in today's age, that you have to be able to stretch the floor a little bit just to be able to allow your guys to attack the rim. And that's one thing that suffocates Utah, especially come playoff time.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, even with that being said, I probably could even make arguments that Andre Drummond is still the best defense center in the league. Like I said, he had 2 steals
Essentially,
per game last year. Rudy Gobert, I don't even think he had 1 steal per game last year. And if he did,
he did not.
it was
Never.
just over. So I mean, it's almost like a lot of, yes, again, spacing makes a good thing for Gobert. Gobert is very strong in the post, but I mean, his wingspan is what adds a lot of his defensive ability too, where his blocks come in solely because of that. And he is
Yeah.
obviously pretty athletic, but Andre Drummond's ability to steal the ball might put him ahead of him there. So Rudy Gobert, it's really just like you said, the consistency, the fact he's on a 50-win team. If
Yeah.
he's ever to evolve a bit more, that would definitely maybe put him higher on the list. But again, going back to it, at the top 5, I don't think he's ever going to be better than any of these guys because they're really, really good.
Yeah. Well, let's see who we got. So right after Rudy Gobert at number 6, finally cracking the top 5. Younger fella, 22, 23 years old maybe now. DeAndre Ayton.
DeAndre,
That his name?
that is his name. This is
Yeah.
a guy
Fella.
I was very happy to see him this high on the list because I didn't think you were going to rank him as high as me. I actually think, to me, it was almost a question of, is he a top 3? But then I just couldn't justify because, again, everyone is just so good at this level. Even the guy ahead of him at 4, I would have loved to put DeAndre Ayton at 4. I just think the guy ahead of him does a bit more. But Ayton, I mean, he's a guy, he's only been in the NBA for 2 years, but he's improved both years, even by a bit. He's a guy who's clearly living up to the top pick standard. He's on a team that is clearly on the rise, so we're just going to see him keep getting better and better. I wouldn't be surprised if this year, maybe the year after, we see DeAndre Ayton lead the year in blocks. We're probably going to see DeAndre Ayton win Defensive Player of the Year, if not once, multiple times.
That's high.
I'm not going to say he's ever going to be in the MVP discussion because he has guys like Devin Booker on his team who, if there's a Phoenix Sun ever nominated, it will likely be him. But DeAndre Ayton is definitely one of the best centers. Like I said about Wendell Carter Jr. earlier, these young guys, they are, again, so athletic. They're very lean. He played 32 minutes per game last year, and if he keeps going on this, I mean, if you have DeAndre Ayton in a game for 36 minutes a game, you can't ask much more in the post. And it's not like they have it's not like they have a bad secondary player in the post either. So, I mean, I think the Suns are obviously great there. And DeAndre Ayton is a guy who next year definitely going to be in the top 5. If he keeps improving at this rate, we've said about a couple guys, if they could get to 24 and 10, 25 and 10, I think Ayton can. And then it will really be discussion of, is Ayton a top 3 center? Is Ayton the top center? And that's where he's going to end up very soon, I think.
See, I can see your point in there where he has put up this number. He's still young. He'll be 22 next year. He's put up an 18 and 12 year essentially last year, which is fantastic for a team that wasn't in the winning mindset. With that being said, I think it really comes down to the wins that he would bring to his team. I don't think he's proven that just yet. You have really high esteem for him when it comes to his defensive presence. I really hope he does fulfill that. He's already done fairly well. He's so young. It's so hard to predict what kind of level he can become once he really fills into that frame. The guy's 22 years old. I feel like I'm old. I'm 25. It's a little embarrassing. But that being said, he definitely does bring a certain mentality to that team. My only knock on him is the same thing that we say for Whiteside, Drummond, Gobert, great defensive players, great mobile bigs. They can really get around the floor. But my only knock on all those guys is they haven't proven to stretch the floor. I think Ayton's in that same boat, and I don't think he really gets any higher than that on this list until he can prove that he can stretch the floor. And if he can, then that just opens the lane so much for Booker and so all the players on that team. And it's just today's day and age. That's the same reason why Gobert isn't higher either.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not against that on any means. I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, for him to be higher on the list, that is something he needs to develop. I think the main difference with him is I think he has the most potential of those guys to develop it because he is the least stiff. Like, again, guys like Drummond, as strong as they are, there's not as mobile, right?
Yeah.
DeAndre is such just a freak athlete. I think he is much more mobile, where I'm not saying he's going to extend to maybe a great three-point shooter, but I think he could extend to a good mid-range shooter without much difficulty, to be honest. I think it'll happen much like Anthony Davis, where when he came in, he was a lot more post-centric, and he's really just kind of made his way out as kind of time has progressed. I think we could see a bit of a similar route for DeAndre Ayton. I don't know if he'll ever get to a point for rebound production like Anthony Davis.
Yeah,
I do think obviously we'll see him extend a bit. My main concern personally, I think that DeAndre Ayton would be really his passing at this point. I mean, yes, the fact that he did put under 2 assists per game in both of those years, he obviously wanted to improve, but also his turnovers per game were up last year too, which means he's clearly not making the right decisions when he's also passing the ball or putting the ball on the floor. So I think he obviously needs to improve that part of his offensive game as well, developing that IQ, knowing where and when to put the ball, when to pass it out, when not to panic and try to dribble when there's a crowd of 3 around you. So those are a couple of things I think Ayton needs to work on as well if he does want to be better, especially than the number 4 guy. Because I think for the next couple of years, those are really going to be the 2 we debate. I think honestly, top 3 are probably going to just be the 3 guys fighting with each other for the next couple of years as well.
Yeah, no, that's very likely. Like I say, you hit it right at the nail there. Ayton's, if he puts up a couple different metrics, he can definitely move up a spot. Getting any higher than that will be very difficult unless he does really do some drastic improvements. But that's not out of the question. He's 22 years old.
Exactly.
Some of these star players don't make it there until they're 25, 26. Their prime's about 27, 29. He is nowhere close to that. He has so much potential, and it's going to be exciting for that Phoenix Suns team. I know you think he's going to be an all-star this year. I'm not sure about that. But, yeah, I think he's in that discussion. I think he's right up there, and I think that Phoenix is going to be a really good team this year.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I mean, at the end of the day, on spoiling anyone, there is only 2 centers in the West that are higher. So it's not unlikely he's an all-star, right? The odds are more so in his favor than against. He's kind of right in the middle there, so.
And I think it depends all on how Phoenix does.
Yeah, so vote for DeAndre. Make me right. And not Jordan.
Well, Jordan has a chance. You never know. But right after DeAndre in our list, comes in at number 4. I think the playoffs really stepped it up for this guy. It really proved how valuable he is. They've coined him a point center. Probably the most mobile center in the league. Will be one of the best assist getters in the league. Bam Adebayo, probably one of the best defensive centers in the league just by his mobility. He could get up and down that court. He gets a 5 assists per game, 15, 16, and 10 guy. Solid.
Yeah, and I mean, you hit it right on the nail too with the point center comment. I mean, that's really what puts Bam so high on the list. I mean, like you said, so versatile, and we're probably going to get people who knock on to say, "Oh, he's not a center; he's a power forward." And yeah, he did play power forward last year, but he was drafted as a center, and he primarily did play center in his first couple of years with Miami as well. And he'll probably find his way back there. He's not a guy who's fully done developing in terms of filling into his body. He's not a guy who gets pushed around a lot there. And no matter if he's playing on the left or right side or playing a bit up more on the elbow or down on the block, he's a great passer. Like I said, he understands no matter what position he's playing, whether it's the 4, the 5, or the 1, where the ball needs to go, how to dish it out, and where he needs to go next. And that's really what sets Bam apart from DeAndre Ayton at this point, where, again, DeAndre Ayton might put up more of that double-double line. Bam just does so much for Miami. You said it in previous videos, he's the spark plug for them, both offensively and defensively, and he's only getting better. Is he going to get that much better in terms of production-wise? We don't know, but he doesn't have to at the same time because he does so much for this team as he is. So if he stays as he is, perfect. He's going to be number 4 center in this league for a very long time. Probably might even find his way up in potentially a 3 or 2 spot. But if he improves, it could even be even better for him. We could even be talking about, is Bam Adebayo the best center in the league? So time will tell there. But I'm not sure what else you think about him.
See, before last year started, I wouldn't even put him in the top 15. Maybe not even top 30, to be honest. He had that great of a year last year. The fact that he didn't win Most Improved Player. I don't believe he did. Would be a little bit of an insult. If he did, prove me wrong. I'm sorry. But no, he had a fantastic year last year in the playoffs. He led that Miami Heat team. We all talk about Jimmy Butler being the leader of that team. He might be the veteran on that team. Bam Adebayo was the moving presence on that team that got them to the finals, I do believe. Between Butler and Dragic were both the vets, so they did both provide that 18 to 20 points per game. But Bam Adebayo provided that heart and soul on that team. But he also provided that fantastic defense. He is likely the only center that we've listed all day that can defend every single position. He is that quick. He is that mobile. He does get those rebounds still. He brings that certain defensive element that even someone like the Rudy Gobert, the Drummonds, and even someone like Embiid, they're not mobile enough to be able to get in front of those shooting guards, those point guards, even a lot of small forwards. They might defend the paint very, very well. Adebayo defends the paint very well as well. This is without talking about that offensive presence that he brings, that being able to move the ball. I think of someone like Marcus Gasol, but faster.
Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, it goes back same thing with Ayton, where yes, he might not be able to hit the three yet, but because again he is so late, I don't think it's out of the question that he'll ever develop that ability. I think he definitely can, especially as Miami is going to rely on him more and more throughout the years, and we might see him again become kind of more of that Kevin Love thing where he just does everything in the offense to really circulate it. He's going to hit that corner three eventually, but even for the time being, I mean, still a guy who hits his free throws. He hits at a 70% rate. He gets there, I believe, about 5 times per game, which is awesome for a center. A guy who, even though he does so much in terms of, again, assists, when you think of a guy who is so versatile, you feel like, oh, maybe he doesn't rebound as well. Puts up over 2 rebounds a game. And I think the main reason he probably didn't get Most Improved Player of the Year this year, obviously Brandon Ingram gets it, but B, also because going into the year, yes, people might not have ranked him in the top 20, top 15, maybe some people were in
top 50, probably some people.
But I think a lot of people did, because after the All-Star break last year, I believe he put up very similar numbers to what he finished with this year. So there was a lot of people high on him going to this year, which just wasn't sure how it panned out. And I mean, it panned out great. He did exactly what everyone was high on him ended up doing. And probably even better. I don't think anyone expected the 5 assists per game, especially the fact
huge.
It was huge in the fact not only that it happened, but how big of a jump that was. That was 3 assists more per game for a center in his 3rd year, his sophomore to his 3rd year. He gets 3 more assists per game. That's insane. There's some centers who don't even average 3 assists per game in their career, and this guy made that improvement in a year alone. I mean, that's fantastic. That shows a guy who clearly has a great basketball sense. And we'll see where Bam Adebayo hopefully ends up higher in this list, because I like him a lot as a player. But like we said too, it's really going to be a struggle to get higher than these top 3 guys, because they're top.
What they bring to the game is something different. They might not bring that defensive aspect that Adebayo brings, but our top 3 guys, they bring that presence that could be that MVP caliber in any given year.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think if you're in a fantasy draft and you get any of these 3 guys, you're not upset that this was your first pick in a fantasy draft by any means. You're probably pretty happy.
Yeah. So with that being said, at number 3, we have a little young fella, Karl-Anthony Towns, Minnesota Timberwolves.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. He's not higher, to be honest, considering he hits that 3-pointer at 42%. He put up the numbers like he's a star. He is the star of that team and has been for many years at this point. I think he's great.
I mean, not only 42%, but 42% on 8 attempts. That's 8 attempts from a center at 42%. That's amazing.
41-12, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So very, very close.
But I mean, again, on 8 attempts, that's unheard of. I don't think there's any center in the league who is close to taking those attempts, let alone hitting at that efficiency, let alone players in the league. He's a guy who could actually shoot the ball with the best of them in the league. And he's 7 foot tall, and not just, 7 foot when you round it. He's a true 7-footer. He's a big guy. And as much as, yeah, he's been in the league for a few years now, like you said, he still is young. He's probably just getting into his prime about now, has had a couple years where
He'll be 25 next year.
that's what I mean. And he has had a couple years where he obviously first few years goes up in points, goes down a bit production wise over the last couple in terms of not going over the hurdle from what he had his best year of. But that doesn't mean that he's done improving by any means. He's finally has it seems like a team that he likes in terms of they brought in guys that he's happy with, he's friends with. They accept that he's the cornerstone. They're really giving him the time to go. And as long as he could stay healthy, I don't think it's a debate that we're probably having more of a discussion of between the 1, 2, and 3. I just think his longevity and I guess the fact that he hasn't been on a winning team so far is really what hurts him, because the two guys ahead of him, they've both been to a conference final, and Karl-Anthony Towns hasn't even won a playoff series. So.
Yeah, and that's the biggest knock, right? That team has been a playoff team, has been able to lead them. I think back a lot. His numbers are very similar to Kevin Love. Back when Kevin Love was in Minnesota as well. Those numbers are very similar. Towns was actually up to 26.5 and 10.9 rebounds per game last year. His rebounds actually went down. I don't see him out of the realm of even like 28 and 12. I think that would bring him even ahead of the other two players ahead of this list. Another big knock on him, and one of the reasons that Minnesota is where they are, is that as much as he's a solid defensive player, he's not horrible. He's just not in that top 5 center conversation right now when it comes to defense. I think if he does get that defensive mentality up a little bit, he puts in as much effort on defense as he does on offense, then we're not just talking about the top center in the league. We're talking about one of the best players in the league, potentially the best player in the league. The fact that he can potentially get up, that's at 30, 12, 5 assists per game, hitting 42, 43%. That's one of the best offensive years of anyone all time.
I was going to say exactly that. I mean, I feel like I was almost worried that I was going to get some contention because when I make statements like that, you kind of look at me funny, but I completely agree. I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if he does have a year of putting up over 30 a game. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a year where he wins the MVP or he's a top candidate, and the only reason he doesn't win is because he got ripped off and his team maybe didn't have enough wins. But yeah, I mean, Karl-Anthony Towns, at the end of the day, like you said, not only, yes, like you said, he does lack a defensive ability, but he doesn't need to be the best defender in the league. To again reiterate that, the two guys ahead of him, they're not the best defenders in the league either, but they're good defenders, and that's all he needs to be. If he just becomes a good, consistent defender, that's enough to put him in discussion based on what he does on the offensive end, because he is a true leader. He's truly an all-star in that ability. Potentially, like we said, an MVP. He's their franchise player. He's done more than what was asked of him. Like I said, as long as he can stay healthy and he continues to improve, that he's going to go up and he stays at the same level. Probably going to see him around the same spot next year too, as well. To be honest,
he'll be 25 next year. Yeah, like he can definitely even go up in this list.
I could see it. Even again, the two guys ahead of him, as great as they are, there's room. I know there's room.
It's team success. If Minnesota can win those games, then there's no reason why Karl-Anthony Towns can't be the best center in this league.
Exactly. That's what it came down to me, 100%. Like I said, both these guys made a conference final, and not a conference final, but they both at least won a playoff series, and that's really what it came down to me, was the fact that he hasn't done anything there. So it's just not comparable.
Yeah. Well, coming at number 2, you're talking about winning a playoff series, talking about going to a conference final. And I think back of a little fella named Joel Embiid just sitting there crying after Kawhi hits this game-winning shot. So here at number 2 at the top center in our rankings here, we have Joel Embiid.
Yeah, and it's funny that I messed up saying that he went to the conference finals almost twice, because if he did, I think it's a good discussion that he's maybe at number 1. But again,
100%, but he has not.
Exactly. Going back to our last point about Towns, he hasn't, and the guy ahead of him has, and he basically led the team there. As much as we don't want to spoil it, but again, going back to Embiid, obviously on the offensive end, this guy is just next level. The things he could do in the post, it's just unheard of. Obviously, he has a great IQ passing the ball, loves to learn from other players, whether it's greats or guys coming in, has a great ability to learn from different coaches, fit in different systems, is very grateful for the opportunity he's been given with how patient Philadelphia's been given to him. We were talking about it earlier where they could have given up on him. They brought in Jahlil Okafor, and guess what? They got rid of Jahlil Okafor after actually a very good year because they felt like Joel Embiid was just as good as he is. They believed in him, and they were right, thankfully. And Joel Embiid is grateful for that. He said that he owes them a championship. Hopefully he brings it to him. If he does before the guy at number one, he's going to find himself a number one on this list, 100%. But other than the fact that, like we said, he hasn't found a winning formula yet, that's the only knock I have on him at number two. He just needs to stay healthy, find a way to win. I can't say anything else about him, Joel Embiid. He's one of the best players in the league, let alone centers.
Staying healthy is the biggest thing for me.
Yeah.
He's got to prove that he has played okay the last couple of years. He still hasn't put up 65 games yet. That being said, he missed his first two, so any kind of playing time out of him is considered a bonus. The fact that he said he owes Philadelphia a title, that's interesting. I don't know if he's exactly LeBron in Cleveland at this point yet, but you're right. He does bring that presence where he could be the top offensive center, but he's also an above-average defensive center. I think that being with Howard this year is only going to improve his overall skill set. I think that Embiid's a fantastic player. We all did this for years. The only reason that he didn't, he isn't better than what he is because he missed those first 2 years. If he would have played those first 2 years, we'd be talking he'd probably likely be the top center in the league at this point. But being that he hasn't done that yet, the Sixers kind of fizzled out last year. He hasn't proven that yet. But with Doc Rivers this year, I really do believe that he's going to be able to step it up to a certain degree that we'll be talking, again, same thing with Towns, that not just a top center, but potentially a top player in this league. He's just that young still, and he'll be 26 next year. If he can put up that 28 and 12 year again, Philly wins 50, 55 games between him and Simmons. I think he's the top center at that point.
Yeah, and I think the big thing for me for Joel Embiid is Philadelphia has to let him play his game. Even though he did have his best year last year, watching Joel Embiid last year bothered me a lot where he did shoot a lot of bad threes because no one else on that team could really hit it. And it's not last year, but 2 years ago when he shot 4 threes per game. That's the big thing where he shot a lot of them. He only hit at 30%. And it's because he had to take them. There wasn't a lot of other guys who were taking threes. He got the ball there a lot, so he took them. And unfortunately, he's not a bad three-point shooter, but he's not the best. So, I mean, that's something where Philly needs to, again, really let him round out, really let him just work that mid-range, get in there like Anthony Davis kind of style, just work it in, get a lot of free throws, shoots at an 80% clip, which, again, for center.
He's a good shooter.
Exactly. He's a good shooter. Just like at the end of the day, it's hard to have range when you're that tall. If you guys could do it, that's why Town shooting at this efficiency is so amazing. But yeah, you just don't want Joel Embiid to have to take 4 or 5 threes a game. You want him to have to take 2 or 3 max and have him hit at a 35% ratio. And again, hopefully with Howard, that does take a lot of the wear and tear off him when he gets to avoid an injury. He gets a full year. He gets to, like I said, really just focus on playing that mid-range, getting to the free throw line, and just working his game there. We'll probably see Joel Embiid continue to improve his passing as well. And yeah, it'll really just be a fight between these 3 guys moving forward to who's going to get to number 1 long term. But I do think as we do these lists more frequently throughout the years, we're just going to see these top guys just interchanging because, again, they are so good. They do have a lot of similar skill set abilities. Like you said, Embiid, a bit better defender than Towns now as well, as Towns is a better shooter. That defensive ability plus his ability to at least win something gives Embiid the edge right now. But still, unfortunately for him, doesn't make him top center in the league.
No, and that's exactly it. He hasn't proven to take it to the next level yet. I really do believe that he thinks he's the top center of the league at this point. I think he believed that he's in the top center of the league for years now, which confidence is key. I think that's probably what is lacking with Towns. I don't think he has that confidence that he is a top center, and Embiid believes he is. There's no reason why he can't be. If he brings his point per game back up to what he had the year before at 28 points per game, he raises that efficiency a little bit, and he still plays that defensive game, and Philly brings that, wins those couple playoff series, really goes for a run like we've been thinking they would for the last couple of years, then I think it's not a question that he's the top center of the league. But you're right, at these top three guys, they're all between the ages of 24 and 25. They'll all be between 25 and 26 next year. It's going to be incredible for the next 5-10 years. Even if you go past them, between Ayton and Bam at 22, like these guys are going to be 30, and those guys are going to be 27. It's going to be a fantastic next 5-10 years for the center position. I hope that some other guys like Wiseman can come up and really show these guys stuff. But until then, it's going to be really, really exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Even Wendell Carter Jr., another guy. But yeah, I guess we'll get to number one because they definitely have some things to say about who we have there.
Yeah, number one here, it's another European, Nikola Jokic.
Nikola Jokic, I mean, a guy who is probably one of
Serbia.
the steals in the drafts ever, right? Denver Nuggets, they essentially take an unknown and they get one of the best players that they've probably ever had, one of the most versatile centers we've seen up to the league in his career at this point for any center 5 years into this league. The things Nikola Jokic does both on and off the ball are obviously just almost unheard of for a center. He just has an amazing, uncanny passing ability. But
incredible.
I'll pass it to you first, but definitely there's still room again for Jokic to improve his game as well, which does open the room for 2 and 3. And it just puts so much emphasis on that conference finals appearance where Nikola Jokic really just took the reins this year because of what he helped the Denver Nuggets do. The fact that not only they made it there, but he was such a crucial part of it. The fact that multiple times they were down 3-1 and they rallied that team between him and Jamal Murray to come up. We know he's the leader. We know guys love him. We know he's hard-nosed. We know he doesn't give up. And you can't ask for much more. I mean, as much as skill, as much as all these elements are part of sport, heart is a huge element to it. And clearly Nikola Jokic has an endless heart. So, I mean, that's something that alone is giving him the number one spot this year.
If it wasn't for the playoffs, I don't think he'd be at the number one spot.
I agree.
With that being said, it's not just this playoffs. He's been in the playoffs twice, this year, last year.
Yep.
Both years, he's done fantastic.
Yep.
He's one of the only players that raises his game to another level in the playoffs.
Yep.
Defensively, offensively, his numbers only go up. You might let him and go, he's a regular season 20 and 10 guy. Okay, great. But then you factor in 7 assists. And that's not just a 1-year thing. That's something he's been consistent in. 7 assists per game, puts him in the top 15, top 10 potentially every single year in the league. Not at centers. He's the best passing center in the league, easily. But then when he gets to that playoff position, he's actually able to step his game up. He hits the three-pointer from a high rate. He plays hard-nosed defense. In the playoffs, he's easily 24, 25 points per game when it actually matters. With that being said, he doesn't need to have 25 points per game during the season because Denver's a deep team. He just needs to sit there and hit his shot that when he's open, play that hard-nosed defense and move that ball around. But he's proven that he can step it up whenever he needs to.
Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate how great he is too, I mean, you have to remember the Denver Nuggets at a time had Jusuf Nurkic as well. And they decided to trade him away because how good Jokic is. Exactly. Because they knew at the end of the day, Nurkic's ability would overlap with Jokic's, and Jokic's ability is just so great that why would you ever give that up? They knew what they had, and they had to go all in on him, and clearly it paid off. I mean, before we keep just ranting about how great he is, I guess a couple moments, like I said, where maybe there is room for those guys to come in as yes, Jokic does have the ability to hit the three, and he does do it a bit better in the playoffs. But I mean, he was only 30% in the regular season, where with a guy who takes as many of them as he does, you obviously hope he could improve that a bit. You want him to be over 35% because you don't view him as a center, like you said, you view him as a player. So you definitely want him to be able to hit it a bit more consistent, but I don't think that's out of the ability for him at all. As well, on top of that, I mean, he is a guy who, in terms of real plus minus, he was pretty low. He was 45th among centers last year.
Yeah.
So that's like when he's on the court, is he contributing that much? You do put it into question, but at the same time, we know when he's on the court, he is contributing. Where maybe that's just a faction of the Denver Nuggets had a lot of close games last year, and you have to look deeper into that. That's very possible. But at the end of the day, like you said, when Nikola Jokic has to win, they find a way to win. And so we can't sit here and knock things like plus minus, whatever it may be, because they found a formula to make it work. He found himself at number one, and he has the ability to keep doing it. I mean, imagine if he averaged a triple double. That would be, it's not out of the question either, because he loves to pass the ball. He loves to improve that.
Yeah.
As much as he's improved his scoring in other elements, I think when people started to respect his passing, he started to respect it more too. And he just kept working and working and working. And I mean, he could do stuff point guards could do. It's amazing.
Yeah, and he's got that amazing offensive IQ. He's a fantastic player, like you say. He fits in that role. As much as Jamal Murray really stepped up in playoff last year, Jokic is the leader of that team.
Yeah.
He is the leader on offense and defense.
And it's same thing with Embiid, like I said, same thing with Towns, same thing with Nurkic. Hit the free throw amazing. And when you're in the playoffs, you're going to get a lot of free throw shots, especially late in the games. Yeah. And you want a guy who shoots 80%. When you have a center who does it, I mean, you're not going to complain because you know that guy has the ability to bump around and to force a foul and to get you those 2 points when you need it, get you those easy 2 points, whether it's to stay ahead, get ahead, or to come back from behind and start a run. Jokic has the ability to slow the ball down, move it around, hit the three, do everything.
Yeah.
That's just what he is. He's just the most versatile center. He found the ability to win. And like I said earlier too, if one of these guys find themselves on either in an NBA final or they win an NBA championship,
it'll change.
It will. But until then, if they all stay as they are, I think Nikola Jokic probably stays number one next year as well, to be honest.
And given his age, it's very likely. Yeah. All these guys are in that age category, but he's been the one that's been proven at this point. Compared to the other guys that are in the same age category, they haven't proven in the playoffs yet. He's been tried, tested, proven. Unless, like you say, one of these guys wins a finals or even gets to the finals again. Like I think if someone like Ayton wins the finals next year, even he can jump up all the way up. That's how close all these guys are. But with that being said, Jokic had clearly stepped up with his consistency. Even if he ever does drop out of the number one spot, I think he'll be a number two, number three top center the rest of his career. I'm looking at someone like Tim Duncan, but with less of a defensive presence, but with a much better flow of the ball on offense.
It's like a mix of Pau Gasol in him almost.
It's fantastic. I don't think Pau can see the court the way Jokic does. I don't think any big really has.
Yeah, I mean, and if you did happen to listen this far, or if you even just watch Jokic's number one and you haven't watched how good he is, I mean, just go watch guys no-look passes. You will never see a center do the things this guy could do with the ball. It's crazy. And
look at 7-foot Steve Nash.
Exactly. And I mean, like I said at the start, the Jokic rant too, one of the biggest draft steals ever. He was picked, I believe, 41st overall. That's crazy going back to think about. And just the ABA players, they just do not get respect. There was another kid out of Chicago this year who I believe is a power forward. He went 36th overall. I forget his name. Very similar game to Jokic, where, again, these ABA guys, they're playing with grown men. The Euro leagues are actually very high level. And not only that, they're very skill-based. That's what it is. These guys learn very on ball, good ball handling, like I said, learning how to facilitate it. And they come in, and even though they might not be able immediately to, let's say, put up 15 points per game, they get 5 minutes because they don't do things wrong. They know how to facilitate. They know how to stand out. And that's really what are setting a lot of these ABA players apart as well.
They come in as men, whereas a lot of the college players are their kids.
Yep.
They've been playing as men for a long time, and it really goes to show whenever they get into that mindset. I think of someone like Doncic, who averages 10 assists per game, playing over in the EuroLeague. I think of that when I think of someone like Jokic. So I don't really think he can even improve upon that. I don't think that team even needs a true point guard. Jamal Murray is technically the point guard shooting guard, but they don't need that true point guard because Jokic is that good. He's that versatile. He moves up and down the court well enough to be able to be in that position. He is Again, I like to think back on Marcus Gasol for the averages of 4 or 5 assists per game,
Mhm.
but Marcus Gasol wasn't able to realize that aspect of his game until later on in his career, whenever his other athletic abilities faded. Jokic, his athletic abilities are right at top of his prime right now. He's going into his years 25, 26, 27 years, which we've seen centers dominate, and I can't see him regressing.
Yeah, and I feel like for some reason people also feel like he's almost soft on the defensive end. But I feel like if you like even just touch Nikola Jokic, you would feel like he's just a rock. Like this guy just looks like he's made of wood. I mean, he hasn't had a lot of injuries yet. There's no reason to think he's soft. So I feel like just because he's not a force like the guys like Anthony Davis and such, people feel
He's a
like
different player.
exactly.
He
But
doesn't need to be that guy.
exactly, and it's not like he gets pushed around either. Like we
No.
said about Embiid, good defender, and it's like we said about Towns, just needs to get into that level of good defender, and then we could really start considering him here as well.
Yeah, I think whenever, like I say, these guys gonna be interchangeable. Jokic is right up there right now, mainly because of his playoff performance. Whenever it comes to regular season, I think that whenever we do reflect on what we were just talking about today, there's a chance of him going down. With that being said, I don't ever see him going down past number 2, potentially number 3, if the other two guys are at an MVP level. But other than that, he is the best center in the league, hands down.
Yeah. I mean, I'd probably say like worse, maybe number 5, if he has a year where Denver's down. Let's say Murray gets injured, he gets like 16, 8 and 3, 16, 8 and 4, which is a down year. Maybe at a 8 and they have great years and the other two guys stay up, you put them at 5. But I mean, like we said, all these guys really good players, great players. Love to have them all super young. Imagine they just all keep improving too. I mean,
Yeah.
who knows? Center's probably it. We started with center, I feel like, because we were least excited about it. And then as we got into it, it's just like, wow, there's actually a lot of good players here. It's almost not to ruin the other positions, but I mean, I feel like 1 through 25, it's possibly the deepest position.
Yeah, like I wouldn't deny that. Again, I'm a diehard Toronto fan, and the people that we have in Toronto didn't even make neither one of our top 35 lists. That's how deep this team is. That's how deep this position is. What?
We had Ibaka.
Well, like no, yeah, he's a former Toronto player.
Oh, you're saying
on Toronto right now.
right.
Aaron Baines, Alex Len, and Chris Boucher, if he's considered a center, did not make our lineup, and now we're talking about a 50 to 55 win team whose starting center is still not considered a top 25 player in this league. Just that goes to say how deep this is, and that's not the only team that has a center that's a very competitive team that has a center that's not even considered a force in this league.
Yeah.
The LA Lakers, they don't have a center that's considered a top 25 center anymore. So I see this position as being very deep. I do see it as anywhere past from essentially 20 onwards can be very interchangeable as long as you have that defensive presence who brings that certain mentality to your team. If you have the other positions stacked up, you're okay. But it's definitely something that there's a lot of up and comers, and I'm very excited for the position.
Yeah, me too. I mean, even as the league almost transitions a lot, where yes, we just have a lot of big centers, we have a lot of small ball centers now too. So it could be exciting to see guys, maybe PJ Washington, even who is a power forward last year for Charlotte. But if they play Bridges as the power forward, they can move Washington to center. He's a great player already. He could easily make this list. A couple other guys, again, at power forward, I could think of in a similar position where if they end up moving them to the 5 more permanently, we could easily see him here. Again, Christian Wood, we put him this year. Easily could be interchangeable 4 and 5. Put him on either list. Who knows where he ends up, but if he's on a 4. So always fun to have those interchangeable positions too.
But that being said, congrats, Jokic. You are the top center in the league.
Yes, if anyone ever gets to show him this, we congratulate you on becoming the first annual AMSE top 25 number 1 center of the year. We will send you some type of award if we ever see you. It will honestly probably just be like a pack of fruit gushers or something. Let us know what you like, though. We'll hook you up.
Canadian snacks. Get you a Joe Louis. Only one, though, not a box. We're not rich.
Joe Louis. I love it. It's a perfect way to end it. Have a good day, folks.